Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for today's complex world. I am so grateful that you're here listening or watching us today. And this is going to be a really spectacular episode because today's guest is a man on a mission. Literally, Richard Ramos is the founder of Parents on a Mission and the author of the powerful book by the same name. He's worked with thousands of families, schools, and communities to help parents reclaim their voice, reconnect with their teen, and keep them from being pulled into gangs or destructive paths. His message is simple but profound. If the flowers are wilting, talk to the gardener. Today, we are digging into what really means to be the gardener in your teen's life and how to build connection, trust, and character from the inside out. Welcome, Richard. I'm so happy you're here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Cheryl. I really appreciate being on your show.
I think even before we start, tell the listeners why are you here? What are you doing? How did you get to this point today?
Yeah, it's a long journey for sure. I grew up in Northeast Los Angeles, and because of my background in that area, of course, there's a lot of wonderful things about Los Angeles, but in that area, there's known for, gangs and drugs and violence and things like that. And so growing up in that environment definitely had an impact on me, but grateful to my single mother who raised me, the youngest of 5 children. And even though I was able through sports and her discipline to get back on the right track of ultimately, I never forgot where I came from. And I always wanted to be able to try to give back. One of my experiences, I've worked in 2 prisons and a juvenile hall, and I've seen, and not only that, going to a lot of funerals and losing friends, you just remember the impact. So that was one thing. Then I became a at-risk counselor in a junior high school, and that led me to going to do home visits. And that really changed my whole perspective from youth mentoring to parent mentoring. So again, it's a long story, but ultimately I realized that what I was doing with my students at school, I was fighting a losing battle, because when I went to their home and started talking to their parents, because I realized as a young parent, I couldn't just believe everything I was being told. Well, I saw that dysfunction and all that lack of control and lack of respect. And that's when the light went on for me. And I started to try to help parents. And that was many years ago. And I'm still doing that. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
That's amazing. And how are you helping? What is it you're doing now? I mean, we have the book, more than one book. Is there more than one book?
More than one book, yes. Well, what I initially started doing was just teaching classes, but here's the difference that I focused on, where most parenting classes focus on helping parents deal with or fix their kids. My program helps parents deal with or fix ourselves. And that is a big difference because of our lack of growth. A lot of times we have problems. So that is, I think the primary difference of Parents on a Mission and other parenting classes. So I don't know how much in depth you want me to go, but that's
there's a
lot
to
say.
I think we both really collided in our ideas when we first started talking to each other, because when I'm talking to parents, yes, we have all kinds of strategies for specific issues. But I always say, it's not them. It's not them. Sorry, it's you. But that's the good news. I think that's where the magic happens, because we as parents, if it's me, I have some control on what's happening next.
That's right.
And I know you talked about gangs in LA, but I'm pretty certain it's not specific to LA.
Oh, no. No. This is a global issue. But to go back to your question, what I started doing, I realized that I'm one guy, one person. How many people can I really help? So to help parents, what I've done is I started reproducing leaders, certifying them. I wrote a curriculum from my book, one of my books, and they then take that curriculum, and now it's not just me helping parents walk through their emotional maturity and how to grow and just different things that are involved.
Mhm.
That's what I'm doing to help parents, is providing them a tool. The book's one, online courses is another.
Mhm.
But gangs, yeah, LA, I could say, is probably the capital of gangs,
Mhm.
and that started way back in the 1940s. But yeah, gangs are, I mean, just everywhere, and they've changed in somewhat. Now we see it's more about human trafficking and drugs, and we see what's going on in the border here in the United States.
Mhm.
That is more my orientation was more about street gangs and fighting neighborhood. This is my barrio, and you don't belong here, and protecting so-called neighborhood and turf and
Yeah.
drugs. The drugs was also involved, but it was more kind of that. Now it's more about the international, transnational gangs that are much more powerful, and have a lot of influence, from prisons
Mhm.
and from across the border. There's a lot of influence on the street gangs.
Wow. So I kind of want to start at the beginning then. So if parents are, parents, single or not, if they're concerned about, oh, my kid's just hanging around the wrong crowd, the difference between that and, uh-oh, this could be a gang issue. Like, how would they know the difference? Where would they go, oh, I really need to be worried. I really need to start intervening here.
Well, some of it's pretty easy to tell, like the dress. They
Okay.
start changing how they're dressing, how they're looking, how they're talking, tattoos, graffiti that you might see in their room, on their schoolwork. Those kinds of things, are pretty easy to tell. But
Mm-hmm.
other things could be isolation. Now they're not, talking to the friends that they always used to talk to. Separation from that and their parents as well, or even their brothers and sisters. So now this kid who would come home before and talk, just like be around the kid, his other siblings and parents, now more secretive, leaving, coming home later, those kinds of things. Of course, hanging around, with the wrong
Mm-hmm.
people. But those are certainly signs. But also, if he shows up with cash, or all of a sudden has new new clothes or new shoes that you didn't buy him, that he or she couldn't afford. So things like that. Yeah.
Interesting. And so, what age are we talking? Like, is there like, oh, I don't need to worry about it. He's only 13 or she's only 12. Like, what age is there even a myth for parents, like a belief parents have that, oh, they're too young. I'm not worried about it now?
I think in general, elementary school, even though in some places, even at that level, kids are being
Mm.
recruited, inculcated with older brothers and sisters and people that are already involved, and they start giving them that attitude, how to dress. But as far as actually becoming an active gang member, that usually is between the ages of 12 to 15. That's the kind of uh, high risk age.
Hmm.
Uh, and then when gang members, when they get older, or they have a girl that gets pregnant, or they start getting around people of faith or other things like that. That's where what I used to do, where you start to look for the low hanging fruit where you can get them out. But as far as the initial worrying about, is when they get to that middle school, junior high school age, and that's where the real pressure is. There's some pressure in elementary, so I'm not going to say there isn't, but it's mostly at that junior high school level.
Hmm. And what is the lure? Like, what are gang members doing to lure kids in? How are they getting their grips on them?
Well, let me answer that this way, and I mentioned this to you before. Uh, People that work in this industry, gang intervention and gang prevention, which are two different things. Prevention is not intervention. Intervention is when they're already involved. Prevention is how do you keep a kid from never going down that road?
Yeah.
And they used to always ask that question, why do kids join gangs? And I would say, well, that's the wrong question. You're framing it wrong if you want a solution. The question is not why do kids join gangs? The question is why do most kids not join gangs?
Yeah.
And the reason or the answer to that is because of the home that they come from, the culture that they're raised in. So the lure is that if you don't have that loyalty, if you don't have that attachment, basically, if you don't have that relationship with mom and dad, a solid, close relationship, well, the gang is a second family. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't take millions of dollars of research to figure this out. These are kids who are lonely at home, or they're resentful, or they're bitter, or they're angry, or they're abandoned, or they're abused. All of those different factors. And now here comes, somebody that's going to give them power, respect, maybe money, things like that. And that's really hard to resist when you're at that age level.
Yeah. So what would be, okay, so let's talk about prevention first then. Like, what would be the number one prevention strategy for parents? If they're listening to us now and like, I'm not worried, but I want to make sure I never have to be worried. What am I doing?
Don't take the loyalty of your children for granted. Well, that's my son. Of course they're going to be loyal to me and our family. No, they're not. Not without effort, not with our investment, not with our unfocused attention and consistent priority of their life, showing them that your life is my priority, son, daughter, and not taking that relationship and that attachment for granted. That to me, that's my advice. That's the number one issue. Of course, starting as early as possible. But even if, let's say, somebody's listening and their son's already 13, 14, or daughter 15, maybe they're even out there, maybe they're already involved, the answer is the same. It's reestablishing relationship. Maybe there needs to be some forgiveness, some apology, some acknowledgement of where I went wrong. But it's going to come down to that relationship of showing that kid, I really do love you. I really do value you. You really matter to me. And that's why, as you and I know, the emotional maturity of the parent is so vital, because parents aren't able to do that if they're not growing in that emotional maturity.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about in your book, leading, from the inside out, parenting from the inside out. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's talking about, as in any leadership, we know the first issue is we have to look within ourselves. That's what leadership is me being self-aware, as emotional intelligence teaches us. And the reason I would need to be self-aware is so that I can self-manage. And the reason I self-manage is so I can be socially aware, which means that when I'm socially aware, that means that I can come into my kids' room, or when they come home, or I come home from work, I'm in tune with them, not wanting them to be in tune with me. And that all is inner work. That's work from the inside out, where I'm dealing with my emotions, I'm dealing with my moods. I'm recognizing maybe that I had a hard day at work and now I got to go into the house, and maybe mom's been home all day with the kids. And I have to be able to, and of course, if you're listening, mom and dad, nobody gets this right all the time. Okay. I have failed 3 times, but the idea is, before I go into that home, I want to collect myself, take a deep breath, tune in. Where am I at? And then be able to go in and be present and be able to have that conversation with the kids. So that's what I mean by inside out. It's not just about money and buying stuff for the kids and taking them places and things like that. All of those things are good and important, but it's really that inner compass that we are constantly working on. So that's what I mean by inside out.
That's super interesting. And I it's almost like, the tables have really turned for parenting, where 20 years ago, or maybe I should say 40 years ago. But
Yeah,
I mean, there was no reasoning with parents. It was, well, because I said so. It was probably, I
right.
probably heard that 87 times a day, well, because I said so. And there
That's right.
was no questioning, there was no reasoning. It was just the way it was. And it's just not like that anymore. And, you know, sometimes you hear parents say, well, it worked 20 years ago and blah, blah, blah. And I was a good kid. Nothing. That's great. But times are very different. You know, we have this whole digital age that has come through. Like, we have all of these other external factors that has to change the basis of how we parent.
That's right. Well, I say another metaphor I use is that we are losing more kids to suffocation than starvation. And what I mean by that is most communities, when there's youth problems like this, they have this, what I call the outside in approach.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is, okay, well, we need more parks, pools, playgrounds. We need more curfews. We need more jobs. We need more counselors and psychiatrists, more teachers, more. Well, all of those things are from the outside in. But here's the question that to think about. If a kid came to you who had problems, a lot of problems, and they
Mm-hmm.
were suffocating and starving at the same time, which need would you meet first?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to relieve the suffocation,
Yeah.
because until you relieve that, they can't receive from the outside in. Simple drink of water. If I'm out of breath, I need water. I can't drink it until I catch my breath. And
Mm-hmm.
so until we relieve that abusive, bitter, angry heart, that child that's been abandoned, see, those things, if they're not relieved, they have a hard time receiving from the outside in. But once you relieve that, what I'm calling suffocation, but it's really an inner issues that they have. Once you relieve that, then all those things make sense to them. And the reason that I know this is because I used to run a teen center for gang members, and we provided all those things. It did make a difference in their life because they were suffering from other internal issues that had to do with things that were going on at home. And then when we saw those things dealt with, the inside things, then the outside ends, it made sense. If I'm making sense.
Totally making sense. Totally, and it's a great analogy, really. Like, I can totally hear what you're saying there. So then, okay, so if we're talking about those issues, like, say, I'm trying to think of how to word this. So our kid is now, we know they're in it. They're in it.
Mm.
How do we, what is the intervention? We know our kid is in it, or I'm even speaking on an educator side. If a teacher knows that a kid is in it, like, what is the next step? Okay, they're in hard. What are we doing?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. But the hope is being for the parent, if they don't have that relationship, but they realize, but I want to have it, a lot of
Mhm.
times it's going to come from somebody else. That's the role I played at the school. I was able to connect with these kids as a counselor, somebody they trusted, and through my relationship and then me working with their parents, I became like a mediator, helping bridge. Not like I had meetings where I'd have the parent in there and the kid in there. I never
Yeah.
did that. I
Yeah.
just knew that if I worked with mom and dad, things were going to get better, because when kids see their parents changing, when kids see dad having a different attitude, that starts to affect them. So that's one thing. The other thing is, faith. There's a lot of faith-based organizations that are gifted in reaching out to these kinds of kids that are in gangs or drugs. And a lot of times that's what they need. We can't expect them to leave one tribe, group of people, and not replace it with another. Ultimately, we want that to be the family, but a lot of times it goes the other way, where a kid will come out of a gang because of a church group that they join or some other type of positive. So it might be sports. That's
Yeah.
another one, sports. And that becomes the conduit. But the key is there's got to be change at home.
Yeah.
The kid, and that's why Parents on a Mission, our program, has been so, I think, effective, is because the kids see there's something going on with my dad. He's not acting the way he used to, or my mom. And then that opens the door for them to start trusting again, because they don't, the truth is they don't trust mom and dad, because the moment they, I don't know, fail or get out of line, or, get a failing grade or something, then the parents starting on them, like you said, just do what I say, and all that authoritarian that we were raised in. But if they see growth, so what we do, I think, is work on ourselves and hope that through the school, through the church, through the coach, through the relatives, other people that can reach out to our kids and start to build a trusting relationship, and let them kind of be that mediator, I guess you'd call it. That's what I have seen work.
So I'm picturing, I don't know, maybe I'm just stereotyping, but once a kid is in a gang, how difficult is it for them to get out of the gang? Like, is there not a fear that, I remember, when I was like 14 or 15, there was gangs, I think they were called Devil something, in my area. And I knew them, like they were nice kids. They just got into fights every once in a while. But they would also say, well, I can't get out. Like, they'll just beat the crap out of me or whatever. And I'm sure 30 years ago, that might just get your head kicked in. Now it might be fatal. Like, what is that role there that kids play if I want to get out, but I'm scared? Or
yeah, again, that is a tricky one. It is that is the stereotype that, once in, there is blood in, blood out, they call it.
okay.
But I've seen thousands and thousands of gang over my career, and most of it was through faith-based organizations where they turned their life around. Like I said, I worked in 2 prisons, a juvenile hall, and that was the one thing. If you were sincere in your faith, if you had this epiphany and you wanted to change your life, that was something that, now, this was when I worked in the prisons, this was in the late 70s. I don't know how it is now, but that was something they respected. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is, some you could get jumped out of a gang. You get jumped in, you get jumped out.
Okay.
And I helped some kids with that. I didn't tell them to do it, but I just said, what's going to happen. But this is a kid who really wanted to change their life. And so that, but you're right in that it could be fatal. So that is definitely a for real thing. But there are ways. The other thing is, a lot of times, and again, I don't know that this is still true, but a lot of times when guys would get older, now they're in their 20s and 30s, and they start having kids, or they get a girlfriend, or they get a job, they were kind of like, it was kind of like understood that, yeah, I'm still a gang member, but I'm not active. They call it being inactive.
Okay.
So you could go on an inactive status, where you weren't expected to join into the crime or the gang that was the fights and the things that were going to happen, because if you're in the gang, you gotta be there. But at that point, they're like not expecting. They call them the OGs, or the veteranos in Spanish. They're not expected to be there because they've already paid their dues, and now they're trying to work and support a family. But all that said, it's a real thing for younger guys and girls. If they get in, getting out can be a real problem. Of course, what the other thing to do is, to move, but most families can't afford to move and leave the area. So,
and I live, like, I don't know a lot about gangs, period. So for parents who are thinking, well, I have no idea what the heck even happens in a gang, what does it look like? Is there a hierarchy? Is there like roles each person plays? Like, if a parent is concerned, they would have some kind of conversation. They would have the language they need for their kids. So they're like, so their kids not saying, you have no idea what you're talking about. This parent is sitting down saying, hey, I know what's happening here, and really have some kind of language that the kid knows. Oh, okay, maybe they know a little bit about what's happening here, and that might make them have a little bit of a connection, like almost an empathy. Like, I know you're in this, I feel like you're in this gang. I feel like you're getting connected here somehow. And these are things that you might have to do. And do you know what I mean? Like, just kind of have that common thread.
Well, one thing, I mean, this would take a lot, but if a parent could say, look, I feel like you're hanging out with the gang. What is it about? Without judgment, without commenting, without anything, just listening. Well, they're probably not going to say anything. They're probably going to ignore that or just deny it. And then you kind of don't say anything, but at least you're showing them, hey, I'm interested in what's this about? You can do that. But as far as this, when I was involved in this in the 90s, all the research showed that gangs are not highly organized. A lot of being a gang is just hanging out, getting high or drinking, partying, cruising, hanging out. And then, there were times where there's either a fight or a drive-by shooting because of retaliation. But there's not a real strict hierarchy, although there is definitely always a leader or more than one, or usually there's a leader. But again, the transnational gangs and these more sophisticated cartels, I don't know that much about that, but it seems to me they're a little more organized. And then in the Mexican mafia, which I dealt with a lot in the prison, that is a real thing. And they have a lot of influence in the streets. And there is hierarchy there. They have soldiers and they have captains, and they do have somewhat of a hierarchy. But the gangs in the street, there wasn't a lot of organization there. Again, maybe there is now, I don't know, but before there hadn't been, because you're talking about a lot of young people, and they didn't really understand the organizing and things like that. So I'm sure some were more than others, but as far as for parents, I don't know that that's so much important to understand. I think what's important is that if they feel that that's what's happening, to try to let their kid know, I'm aware of this. I'm concerned about it, and without saying it, it's like the worst thing you can do. We know this in relationships. The more you try to pull them away, the closer you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, doesn't work. I've never seen it work. It's the relational, caring, concern, genuine. Okay, I don't like this, and I wish you weren't doing it, but can you help me understand what's going on and why?
Yeah, I think you called it the surrogate family, like a gang, like not their enemy. In their eyes, this is not their enemy.
Right. Oh no. Well, that's the thing about it, and this goes back to parents. Why is your kid joining a gang? Why do they feel the need to join a second family? And that's the issue when I talk about loyalty in the book. How do you win the loyalty of your son or daughter? Because in my opinion, every parent, I say America, could be the world, you are in a daily battle for the loyalty of your son and daughter. And if you don't understand that, you're not even in the game, and you need to get in the game. Because again, it's just a mistake. But if, that's a hard question if my son or daughter was in a gang, that's a hard question to answer. Why are they in a gang? Because then we want to blame everybody and everything else rather than saying, maybe there's something missing at home.
Yeah. I'd love to wrap up this last question with, a parent knows their kid's in the gang and is really trying to reconnect and really try. What is like 2 or 3 of the most important things they can say to them to catch them? Like what are the conversation starters? What are those, like, instead of do, you know, you this, you that, instead of that, how do they like start reining that back in? And it might take a long time, but how do they even start?
I would start with reinforcing how much I love you, son. I just want you to know how much I love you. And I'm sorry for whatever I may have done to cause this. I don't know. But if I have, I love you. I'm concerned. I'm sorry. So that the second thing, as I already said, would be, can you help me understand?
Mm-hmm.
And really focus and and listen to whatever they say without, again, no explanations, no judgments, no advice, none of, just listening and showing the kid that, hey, I really want to know, I'm concerned, and it breaks my heart, but this is a choice you've made, and I want to know what I can do, because I just don't feel like this is good for you. But
Yeah.
you know, I want to understand. So if that's what I would do. And then the third thing is, sometimes this again, there's so many dynamics here, but sometimes if you befriend their friends who might be gang members, that helps show, hey, I'm concerned about you guys, and yeah, your friend can come over, yeah, that's fine. Or if you guys are going to hang out, please don't, be drinking or using drugs, but yeah, if you guys want to hang out here for a while, watch some movies or play video games, or because gang members do those things,
Yeah.
um, then that kind of shows that you are at least trying to embrace some of these guys or girls that that they have embraced. And I used to do that. My kids were not in gangs, but they were bringing home some kids that were always in trouble, and I would welcome that, because I wanted those kids to see, hey, you know what, we're not judging you, we love you.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that really helped them, and my kids always appreciated that, because they could bring their friends to a normal home.
Yeah. I used to love, and did this until my kids got their own cars, is I was always the taxi driver, because
Yeah.
they sat in the back seat and they forgot pretty quick that I was driving, and they had their own conversations. And man, I had a hawk ear. I knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
They didn't even think about it. I don't even think they realized what they were saying. But if it meant even sitting in a parking lot for 3 hours while they were at a party, I would volunteer, because I wanted to know what was going on, and I wanted their friends to know me, so that,
Right.
you just like, sometimes as parents, I don't know, we have to also, I think, sometimes step back and say, okay, this is right now, I'm not in a position where I'm going to have some influence, but I have
Right.
this really amazing aunt, or there's this really great uncle, or there's a teacher that they love. Like, can you even talk about, for a second, just backing off, like being vulnerable enough to say, okay, I just am not going to make any changes here, but I have this really caring adult to introduce. Like,
Mhm.
important, right?
Very, very important. And one more, I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that we enable our kids
Yeah.
to, do, like I said, if friends want to come over, that's fine, but I'm not enabling them to, drink and get high and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that's what they're doing. But as far as, yeah, now this is another thing I always say that people kind of struggle with. I think I told you that everybody says it takes a village to raise a child. I say it does not take a village to raise a child. It just takes good parenting. But there is a role for the village, which is support, like what you're talking about. But the reason I say that is because I feel like government and schools are trying to take the authority of parents away from, they're undermining the authority of parents, teaching values and different things that parents don't want. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why they know the authority of raising children belongs with mom and dad, not the village. But
Mm-hmm.
that said, yeah, of course, the village can be very helpful, like you just said, where
Mm-hmm.
it's not, if it's not going to be me, maybe it's the coach or the pastor or my
Mhm.
uncle or whoever it is. Whoever, it doesn't matter who it is, but that person can become very important in influencing uh,
Mhm.
child. But I got to keep saying, Cheryl, but the key to this lasting is the growth and the change that the kid goes back to. Because you can take a healthy organ, and if you transplant it into a diseased, unhealthy body, guess what's going to happen?
Mhm.
That's what was happening with my kids. I was building them up, encouraging them, and then they'd go home, and that's where I got the wilted flower. I'd
Yeah.
water the plant, they'd be all, and then a week later they're wilted again and dying, and I could see that there was no follow through at home. So
Mhm.
that's important.
Such a great analogy. I love that quote. It's so cool. That was good. Richard, tell us how to work with you, how to find you. Talk a little more about your books. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes about the books, and just tell us how to find you. If parents need your help, how do they get it?
Yeah, they can go to my website, Richard R. Don't forget my middle initial. If you put Richard Ramos, there's a lot of Richard Ramoses in the world. RichardRRamos.com. I have resources there, and very soon I will be releasing an online course for Parents on a Mission. Right
Hey.
now, if somebody wanted to be a mentor, as I call them, and be certified, there's a training there they could go through that. But I also know there's a lot of parents that, hey, we just want to learn, what you're teaching.
Yeah.
So that's one that'll be probably next month, I'd say. But the book's available on Amazon. You can get it on my website. I also have another book, From the Margins to the Mainstream. That book I wrote for youth leaders. Uh, how would a young person become a community leader? So
Mhm.
that's what that book's about. If parents wanted to, give their son or daughter that.
Yeah.
And then the next in July, I'll be releasing my new book, The Art of Step Parenting, How to
Mm.
Blend Families Without Tearing Them Apart. So those mostly just go to the website. You can email me at richard@richardrramos.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But listen, I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
No, I really appreciate the work that you do. And it sounds like your next book is going to be another episode for us. I've done quite a few episodes on step parenting and divorce and co-parenting, and it is a personal passion of mine to make that work. So we have to do this again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. I have learned so much even in a half an hour, and I can't wait to dive in a little more into what's your website and more into your books. And it's fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined. We will see you next time.